So what is a pay-for-performance plan? Well, there's lots of different names and lots of different procedures for a pay-for-performance plan. They can be called variable pay plans, compensation at risk, earnings at risk, and many others, including merit pay. But basically, what it involves is a different way of thinking about compensation, that there isn't just a base pay that you come to work and you do your job and you get paid. But in pay for performance, all of that pay is not guaranteed, and there may be more or less depending upon how the individual employee performs or how the organization as a whole performs. So we can see that these types of plans are very popular, and there was really a growth of interest in these types of plans over the last 2 decades. A survey of different types of short-term incentive plans, and if we look at any short-term incentive plan, 99% of organizations used some type of short-term incentive plan. This growth and interest in pay for performance might be traced back to the increased competitiveness that we see in the marketplace due to technological innovation and globalization. The basis of performance that is involved in these different plans spans from corporate performance to business unit to performance to individual objectives. And we also see that long-term incentive plans are used as well as short-term plans, but the long-term plans tend to be more prevalent on higher level executive jobs. Now, merit pay is widely used, meaning that the increases that you get from performance are added to base. And we can see that when this is done, that employees can really increase their base salary tremendously through a merit pay system. And that's a key distinction made about merit pay plans, is that they link the compensation received for performance to base salary. The amount of merit increase received is often determined by the salary structure that looks at the midpoint and the range of the salary for a particular position. Thus, there still is concern that merit pay keeps salaries within the range that makes the organization competitive. Most merit systems are annual in basis, and as employees receive performance appraisals, they are linked back through compensation and merit pay increases. So when we talk about merit pay, again, it is very important because it is linked to base. Other forms of pay per performance are not linked to base, and we can see that that has a tremendous impact on the amount of compensation given for jobs. There's many other forms of short-term incentive. Merit bonuses, as opposed to merit pay, are one-time payments that are not added to an employee's base pay. Thus, merit bonuses over time are less expensive than merit pay. Organizations often use spot awards. These are awards for exceptional performance on a project, can be given to individuals or groups at the discretion of management. For key individuals, it may be useful to have an individual incentive plan where there is some structure for pay for performance for particular individuals in the organization who have a large influence on organizational performance. So when organizations are concerned about rewarding groups, they turn to team incentive plans. Again, many times the performance of an organization depends on the coordination between employees. And to have some Established measure of team performance can be used to determine the magnitude of some incentive pay. In these group incentive plans, there's some standards set for performance of the team, and that is then used to determine the magnitude of some incentive pay. These types of plans also have issues of execution and management. Oftentimes, these plans are just too complex, and there are issues of perceived unfairness where employees feel like they don't have control over the outcomes for which they're being rewarded. Another problem with team compensation systems is that because they're so complex, they're not communicated very well. But because of the issues of complexity and fairness, more effort should be put into communication because that's going to be the difference between success and failure with these plans. The metrics that are used for performance standards vary. And so we can use productivity improvements, customer satisfaction measures, financial performance, and also the quality of goods and services. Additionally, I have seen in some areas where safety metrics are used in team incentive plans. Traditionally, the focus has been on financial measures and looking at operating effectiveness, like cost per unit produced. But as these plans have become more popular, we have seen other types of metrics beyond those financials, like customer satisfaction and other elements of quality. Thus, there has to be a lot of good planning that goes into the implementation of these types of plans. And while that's being done, there should be consideration of whether they're even appropriate in the first place. When outcomes are very uncertain, when there's a high level of risk, it may not be the best type of thing to shift that risk to employees because long term, that can have really detrimental effects to the organization if employees are perceiving that the financial benefits of employment are not outweighing the risks that they've suddenly taken on. Now, team incentive plans again focus on units within an organization, but large group incentive plans tend to incentivize performance of larger groups or the organization as a whole. Within these large group incentive plans, we might be defining standards by operating measures within the organization. For instance, when we're doing gain sharing. And the other popular form of large group incentives is profit sharing plans. And these continue to be popular, and partly because the metrics that are being used are so well established. The difficulty here is making employees feel that link between what they do and the ultimate profits realized by the organization. Because both gain sharing and profit sharing have advantages and disadvantages, we're starting to see hybrid models that combine the two, that include both standards and metrics for operations and financial outcomes such as profit. By doing this, we can give employees a sense of how they can influence the ultimate profits of the organization by incentivizing those more near term operational metrics that they might see a closer connection to with what they're doing in their job. Now, thus far, we've been looking at short term incentives, but we also need to consider long term pay for performance incentives. Long-term incentives focus on performance for more than just 1 year. At the heart of these types of plans is the intention to motivate the long-term performance of the organization. Now, while the evidence on the effectiveness of long-term incentives is mixed and it's really uncertain in that we have not done enough research to fully understand when it works well and when it doesn't. And we need to continue to give it a chance. One way that long-term incentives are done is through employee stock ownership plans. These are a way of getting incentive for long-term organizational performance driven throughout the organization, whereas stock options are generally a plan only for executives in the organization. The value of stock ownership plans is that they give employees a sense of ownership and will make them more willing to engage and participate in decision making in the organization. Again, the evidence of the effectiveness for employee stock ownership plans is mixed, and what it does show is fairly small effects on productivity. However, there's also a lot of variability. Some organizations showing much more effectiveness and other organizations showing less. And so it's something where I think that there's promise in the idea and through the application of some, but it's not a slam dunk that it's going to be effective. It really depends on how it's executed. Now, interestingly enough, this drive towards having a broader base participate in long-term incentives has changed how we approach stock option plans, and broad-based option plans give stock grants to a larger base of employees. And I think that this is something we're going to continue to see, is that consideration of how we can align all employees with the long-term interests, and incentives may be a part of doing that. Again, we return to the question of, does pay for performance work? Ultimately, this is a question we have to answer, and ultimately the answer is it depends on how it's executed. And some key considerations to make as we wrap this up is, what is the payout? Is the payout large enough to motivate and yet not too large to threaten or be too risky? How are the goals set? Are they attainable? Are they a challenge? Are they impossible? This is going to determine whether it really truly motivates employees. Oftentimes these goals are set on metrics. The question is, where are the data we're using from those metrics? Are they still relevant? Again, usually it's historical and it may be still relevant, but we have to consider, how has the landscape changed and how might those metrics need to be adjusted accordingly? And as we add all of these metrics, we have to really be concerned with whether this is something that people can keep within their minds. If they're not too complicated, if there aren't too many numbers and too many ratios, that it just becomes too complicated for people to understand. And when that happens again, it's not going to have the intended result, which is incentivizing and motivating better performance. Thanks for listening. When you have questions, please contact me. You can email me, you can call me. I look forward to talking with you. Thanks. Bye.